My sister accidentally added me to the real family chat, the one I was never meant to see. 923 messages mocking me for 7 years, calling me the charity case, betting on how long I'd last, laughing about my divorce. I didn't argue. I didn't leave the chat. I screenshot everything. Then I sent one line. Thank you for the evidence. What happened next at Grandma's birthday party? Nobody was prepared for. The notification came through at 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the kind of unremarkable night when you're half watching something on television and half scrolling through work emails, wondering if you should just go to bed. Maya has added you to the fam. I remember thinking it was strange. We already had a family group chat, the one where we coordinated holiday schedules and shared photos of my niece's school plays and sent happy birthday messages with too many emojis. I was in that chat. Had been for years. My thumb hovered over the notification for a moment. Maybe Maya had created a new one for planning Grandma's 80th birthday party next month. That would make sense. She was always the organizer, the one who remembered everyone's dietary restrictions and made spreadsheets for gift contributions. I tapped the notification. The chat loaded slowly on my older phone, messages populating in chunks. I saw my name almost immediately, which made me smile for half a second before my brain registered the context. Diane. Claire's bringing her famous potato salad again. Lol. Maya. OMG, stop, she'll hear you. Diane. She's not in this chat. Maya, that's the whole point, Kevin. The charity case chat strikes again. Maya. Kevin. Kevin, what? We've been calling her that for years. Diane. He's not wrong. I scrolled up. And up. And up. The chat history went back 7 years. I don't know how long I sat there that first night. Long enough for the television to go dark from inactivity. Long enough for my tea to go cold on the side table. Long enough to read maybe 300 messages before my vision blurred and I had to set the phone down and remember how to breathe. They had a system. That was the part that struck me first. Not the cruelty itself, but the organization of it, the casual efficiency. Kevin had created the chat apparently, right after I'd been laid off from my marketing job in 2017. He'd named it The Fam, with what I can only assume was deliberate irony. The membership was everyone: Mom, Dad, my brother Kevin, my sister Maya, my brother-in-law Thomas, Kevin's wife Jennifer, even Aunt Patricia, Mom's sister, who I'd always thought liked me. Everyone except me. I learned things in that chat. I learned that when I'd asked to borrow money during my divorce, a loan I'd repaid within 8 months, they'd taken bets on whether I ever would. Dad had bet against me. He'd lost $200 to Kevin, and Kevin had never let him forget it. I learned that when I'd brought my ex-husband Marcus to Thanksgiving for the first time, they'd started a separate thread within the chat called Red Flags, where they cataloged everything wrong with him. They'd been right, of course. Marcus was a red flag factory, but they'd never said a word to me. They'd just watched and documented and laughed. I learned that when I'd gotten my new job 3 years ago, the one I was so proud of, the one with the title and the modest raise that felt like everything at the time, Maya had texted. She acts like she cured cancer, LOL. It's an entry-level marketing coordinator position at a company nobody's heard of. My mother had responded with 3 laughing emojis. My mother. The thing about discovering something like this is that time does strange things. The first night felt endless. I read until 4 a.m., until my eyes burned and my chest ached from forgetting to breathe normally. Then I somehow fell asleep on the couch and woke up 2 hours later to my phone alarm, and for about 3 seconds I didn't remember. Then I did. Called in sick to work. First time in over a year. I sat at my kitchen table with coffee I didn't drink and my phone face down in front of me, and I just existed in the aftermath of knowing. Here is what you should understand about my family, about how I'd understood my family before that night. We weren't perfect, but we were close. That was the story I'd been told, the story I'd told myself, the story I'd told Marcus when we were dating and he asked about my childhood. My parents had high standards but good hearts. My siblings were competitive but supportive. We argued sometimes, but we showed up for each other. I had built my entire adult life on the foundation of that story. I had moved back to my hometown after the divorce, specifically to be closer to them. I had declined a job opportunity in Seattle because Maya had been pregnant with twins, and Mom said it would break her heart if I wasn't there for the birth. I had spent every holiday, every birthday, every mundane Sunday, dinner for the past 4 years, making myself available, being present, being family, because that's what family did. And the whole time, all of them, every single one of them, had been laughing at me in a chat I didn't know existed, taking screenshots of my messages from the real family chat to mock in the fake one, betting on my failures, cataloging my perceived inadequacies with the same care I might use to organize a spreadsheet for work. 7 years, 923 messages. I counted. I went back to work the next day. I'm not sure what else I would have done. The world hadn't stopped. It just felt like it had. In the following days, I kept reading. Not compulsively. I couldn't do that again. Couldn't survive another night of scrolling through years of casual cruelty. But methodically, 30 minutes a night before bed, like taking a bitter medicine. I learned to read it without crying, then without my hands shaking, then with something closer to clinical detachment. I took screenshots of everything. I didn't know why exactly. Some instinct for documentation that I couldn't name. I created a folder on my laptop called Work Archive and buried the screenshots in a subfolder 3 levels deep, where no one would think to look. I organized them by year, then by theme, then by person. I learned which family member said what and how often. Kevin was the cruelest, but that somehow didn't surprise me. He'd always had a mean streak he disguised as humor. Jennifer, his wife, rarely participated but never objected. Dad was quieter than I'd expected, contributing only occasionally, but his comments were always the ones that cut deepest because they were so casual, so offhand, as though my failures were simply accepted fact. She's doing that thing again where she pretends her life is fine. You'd think after 40 years we'd stop falling for it. That was Dad from last Thanksgiving. I'd been showing Mom pictures from my vacation to Portland, the first real vacation I'd taken since the divorce. I'd saved for it for 8 months. I'd been so happy. Mom hadn't responded to Dad's message, but she hadn't disagreed either. Here's what they said about my divorce. Kevin, Marcus finally figured out what we all knew. Maya, honestly surprised it lasted as long as it did Kevin. The charity case couldn't even keep a man who was clearly settling in the first place, Diane. That's not fair. Marcus had his own issues. Kevin, sure, Mom, keep defending her, Diane. I'm not defending her, I'm just saying, Kevin. You're always just saying. That's why she thinks she's part of this family, Diane. She is part of this family, Kevin. You know what I mean? There it was, the heart of it. You know what I mean. I read that exchange maybe 20 times, trying to parse it, trying to understand what Kevin meant and what Mom understood, and whether any of them had ever looked at me and seen a real person, or if I'd always been something else to them. The charity case. The one who wasn't quite right. The family member they tolerated rather than loved. I thought about all the times Kevin had put his arm around me at holidays, called me little sis, made jokes about protecting me from the world. I thought about how I'd always felt grateful for his protection, even when it felt condescending. At least someone was looking out for me, I'd thought. And the whole time. They talked about my job constantly. I'd been promoted twice in the past 3 years. Each time, I'd shared the news in the real family chat, the one I was supposed to be in, and received congratulations that felt slightly muted, but still warm. Good job, Claire. So proud of you. Keep climbing. In the other chat, the real chat, the one with the accurate name, Maya, she's really milking this senior coordinator thing, Jennifer. What does a senior marketing coordinator even do, Kevin? About as much as a regular marketing coordinator, but with 3% more delusion. Dad, she seems happy. Maybe we should just let her have this. Kevin, you're too soft on her, Dad. That's the whole problem. Dad, I just don't see the point in tearing her down. Kevin, I'm not tearing her down. I'm being realistic. She's 41 years old, making entry-level salary at a startup that'll probably fold in 2 years. At some point, someone needs to say it. Maya, he's not wrong, Dad. Fine, I still don't want to hear it. I didn't know what to do with Dad's messages. They were almost worse than Kevin's outright cruelty, because they existed in this murky middle ground, defending me sometimes, dismissing me others, but always from this position of authority, like I was a child whose feelings needed to be managed, rather than an adult whose dignity deserved respect. He thought I seemed happy. He wanted to let me have this, as though my happiness were a toy they could decide to give me or take away. 2 weeks after Maya accidentally added me to the chat, I was sitting across from her at a cafe, near her house, watching her eat a salad and talk about the logistics of Grandma's birthday party. So I'm thinking we do the dinner at Rosario's, because Grandma loves their chicken parm, and then cake at Mom and Dad's afterward. What do you think? I watched her mouth move. The same mouth that had typed honestly surprised it lasted as long as it did about my marriage. The same mouth that had typed she acts like she cured cancer about my job promotion. The same mouth that had typed, just 3 days ago, can't wait to see what embarrassing thing Claire does at Grandma's party this year. Remember when she cried during the toast? I had cried during that toast. Grandma had talked about the importance of family, about how her greatest blessing was seeing her children and grandchildren gathered together, about how nothing mattered more than the people in this room. I'd cried because I was moved, because I loved my grandmother, because I believed what she was saying. Kevin had texted, "Oh God, here come the waterworks," and everyone had responded with laughing emojis. "Claire, you okay?" I blinked. Maya was watching me with what I'd always read as genuine concern. Her brow was slightly furrowed. Her hand had stopped halfway to her mouth, fork suspended in air. "Yeah," I said. "Sorry, just tired." "You've seemed off lately. Is everything okay at work?" I could have told her then. I could have said I know about the chat and watched her face do whatever it was going to do, probably cycle through confusion to horror to damage control in about 3 seconds. I could have confronted her right there in the cafe, with the gentle indie music playing and the college students typing on laptops around us. Instead, I said, "Work's fine, just a lot going on." "Well, you know you can talk to me about anything." She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "That's what sisters are for." I made myself smile. I made myself squeeze back. I made myself sit there for another 45 minutes talking about cake flavors and seating arrangements and whether Uncle Richard should be seated near Aunt Patricia, given their ongoing passive-aggressive feud about their mother's estate. I made myself be the person they thought I was. The charity case who didn't know she was a charity case. The outsider who thought she was inside. I had realized, somewhere in those 2 weeks of reading and screenshotting and organizing, that I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not because I was afraid, though I was a little, but because I didn't know what I wanted the confrontation to achieve. Did I want an apology? I wasn't sure I'd believe one. Did I want an explanation? I'd already read 923 messages worth of explanation, and none of it made me feel better. Did I want them to feel what I felt? That was closer, maybe, but what I felt wasn't a single thing. It was layers upon layers. Grief and rage and humiliation and something deeper that I couldn't name. Something that felt like watching the foundation of a building you've lived in your whole life crumble and realizing there was never any foundation at all. I wanted them to understand what they'd taken from me, but I didn't know how to make them understand. I wasn't sure understanding was something people like them could do, so I waited. I kept reading, I kept screenshotting, and I kept showing up, to Sunday dinners, to birthday parties, to casual texts in the family chat that I now knew were being mocked in another window. I became very good at performing normalcy, at smiling when I wanted to scream, at saying "love you too" when I wasn't sure I'd ever love any of them again. And I watched. 3 weeks in, something shifted. I was reading through a thread from last Christmas. They'd been particularly active during the holidays, when I came across a conversation I'd somehow missed in my initial grief read. "Kevin, she's really going to wear that dress?" Maya. "Oh God, I saw it. It's God, From like 2:15. "Kevin, the charity case doesn't exactly have a budget for new clothes, Diane. Leave her alone about the dress. She looked fine." "Kevin, fine is exactly the problem, Mom. She's 40 and she looks fine." Meanwhile, Jennifer spends actual money on looking good, and Claire shows up in clearance rack specials. Jennifer. Kevin, what? It's true." Maya. "He's not wrong, but can we—" "Maybe not, Diane. This is getting mean." Kevin. "Mean is being so pathetic that your entire family has to pretend you're succeeding. Mean is making us all perform for her so she doesn't have another breakdown. Mean is being 40 years old and still expecting everyone to manage your feelings." The conversation had stopped there. No one had responded to Kevin. I imagined them reading his message and feeling, what, uncomfortable, guilty, or just ready to move on to the next topic. The way you do when someone at a party says something too honest and everyone pretends they didn't hear. But something about that thread crystallized something for me, making us all perform for her. Kevin thought he was being burdened by pretending to care about me. He thought the real cruelty was what I asked of them by existing, by being divorced, by having a modest job, by wearing clearance rack dresses to family holidays. He didn't see the irony. He didn't understand that the performance was what had sustained me, that I had believed their love was real precisely because they were so good at faking it. He had stolen something from me, years of authentic connection I thought I had, and then complained about the effort it took to steal it. That was when I stopped feeling hurt and started feeling something colder. I wasn't going to give them a confrontation, not the messy, emotional kind they could dismiss as another Claire breakdown, not the pleading, tearful kind that would confirm everything they believed about me. I was going to give them consequences. I just had to figure out what that meant. Grandma's birthday party was 4 weeks away. I started planning. Not the kind of planning that involves spreadsheets and revenge fantasies. I wasn't going to stand up during dinner and read aloud from the chat, though I'd be lying if I said the thought hadn't crossed my mind. I wasn't going to make a scene, or cry, or give Kevin another anecdote to share in the group chat about how unstable I was. I was going to do something much simpler. I was going to tell the truth about what I'd seen, the truth about how long I'd known, the truth about what I'd decided to do with that knowledge, but not to them, not to the people who had spent 7 years lying to me. They didn't deserve my truth. They had forfeited their right to it by treating my trust as something to laugh at. I was going to tell Grandma. Let me tell you about my grandmother. Margaret Rose Holbrook was born in 1946, the third of 5 daughters to parents who had survived the Great Depression and expected their children to be made of similar steel. She had married my grandfather at 19, been widowed at 42, raised 4 children on her own while working as a school teacher, and never once in my memory complained about any of it. She was not a warm woman exactly, not in the way people expect grandmothers to be. No excessive cookies and hugs, no sentimental weeping over childhood photos. But she was fair. That was the word that came to mind when I thought of her. Scrupulously, almost terrifyingly fair. When I was 8, Kevin had blamed me for breaking a vase in her living room. I hadn't done it. He'd knocked it over while roughhousing. But he was 11 and charming, and I was 8 and crying, and everyone believed him. Everyone except Grandma. She had questioned us both separately, like a detective, and then announced to the whole family that Kevin was lying and would be paying for the vase out of his allowance. Kevin had hated her for months after that. He'd called her names, under his breath, refused to hug her, sulked through every family dinner until even Mom got frustrated with him. Grandma hadn't cared. She'd simply waited him out with the patience of someone who had weathered worse storms than an 11-year-old's tantrum. Truth always matters, she told me once, when I was maybe 15 and complaining about something unfair at school. Even when no one else cares, even when it costs you, you tell the truth and let other people decide what they're going to do with it. I had thought about that advice a lot in the years since. I'd thought about it during my divorce, when Marcus wanted me to lie to make things easier, and I'd refused. I'd thought about it when I got laid off, and my pride screamed at me to pretend I'd quit, and I'd told the truth instead. I'd thought about it every time being honest had made my life harder, and I'd done it anyway because that was who I was. And now I knew that my family had been punishing me for it the whole time. Every moment of honesty they'd witnessed had become another joke in the chat, another example of how pathetic I was, how naive, how easy to mock. But Grandma was different. Grandma had always been different. I was going to tell her the truth, and then I was going to let her decide what she wanted to do with it. The party was held at Rosario's, just like Maya had planned. I arrived early to help set up, wearing a new dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Not clearance rack for the first time in years, but a deep blue wrap dress that actually fit well and cost more than I would usually spend. Not because I wanted to prove anything to Kevin, but because I wanted to feel like myself. The real myself. The one they hadn't managed to destroy. Maya and Jennifer were already there, arranging flowers and place cards. They smiled when they saw me. Genuine smiles, I would have thought once. Now I could see the performance in them. The slight extra effort. The brightness that didn't quite reach the eyes. "Claire, you look amazing," Maya said. "Is that new?" "It is," I said. I decided to treat myself. Good for you. Jennifer's smile was thinner than Maya's. She'd never been particularly warm to me, but I'd always attributed it to shyness. Now I wondered how much of her coolness was deliberate, a subtle way of maintaining distance from the family embarrassment. I helped them finish setting up. I was pleasant. I was normal. I laughed at the right moments and contributed to conversation and gave no indication that anything had changed. Inside, I was running through my plan again. After dinner, during the casual mingling time before cake, I would find a moment alone with Grandma. I would tell her what I'd found. I would show her the screenshots, the ones I'd transferred to my phone, and then I would let her decide what happened next. It wasn't a perfect plan. I wasn't sure Grandma would believe me, or if she did, what she would do about it. She was 80 years old, and this was her birthday, and I was about to drop 7 years of family betrayal in her lap. But I had decided weeks ago that I would rather Grandma know the truth and be angry at me than go on letting her believe her family was something it wasn't. She deserved better than the performance. We both did. Everyone arrived over the next hour. Mom and Dad, Kevin and Jennifer, Kevin's kids, 2 teenagers who spent most of the evening on their phones, Maya's husband Thomas and their twins, who were 4 and exhausting in the way that 4-year-olds are, Aunt Patricia, who had driven 3 hours to be there, and Uncle Richard, who had apparently agreed to a temporary ceasefire in their estate dispute for the occasion. And Grandma, of course, wearing a pale pink sweater and pearls, her white hair set in the same style she'd worn for 30 years. She moved more slowly than she used to, but her eyes were sharp as ever, taking in the decorations and the people and the careful attention to detail. "Margaret, you look wonderful," Mom said, kissing her cheek. "I look 80, Grandma said, but thank you." Dinner was fine. It was always fine, these family gatherings. Pleasant conversation, everyone on their best behavior, no one bringing up anything too controversial. I ate my chicken parm and smiled at my nieces and nephews and answered questions about work with just enough enthusiasm to seem normal. Kevin was sitting across from me. Every time I caught his eye, he smiled, that easy fraternal smile I'd believed for so long, and I smiled back. The charity case couldn't even keep a man who was clearly settling in the first place. I thought about his words and I smiled. "She's really going to wear that dress?" I smiled. "Making us all perform for her so she doesn't have another breakdown." I smiled. After dinner, people started to move around. The kids went outside to the restaurant's small patio. Mom and Aunt Patricia were deep in conversation near the bar. Kevin was showing something on his phone to Thomas, probably sports-related. I found Grandma sitting alone at the end of the long table, looking out the window at the street. "Mind if I sit?" She gestured to the chair beside her. "Please." For a moment, I just sat there, watching the evening light catch the pearls at her throat. My heart was beating too fast. I had rehearsed this conversation dozens of times, but now that I was here, the words felt wrong, too formal, too careful. "Grandma," I said finally, "I need to tell you something." She turned to look at me. Her eyes, that particular shade of gray-blue that I'd inherited, were calm and waiting. "What is it?" I opened my mouth to explain, to give her the context, the backstory, the careful frame I'd constructed to make this revelation manageable. But what came out was simpler. "They have a group chat, everyone except me. They've had it for 7 years. Maya added me by accident 3 weeks ago. I've read everything." Grandma didn't react the way I expected. She didn't gasp or express shock or immediately ask to see the proof. She just sat very still for a long moment, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady on my face. "What kind of things did they say?" I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking slightly, but I navigated to the folder, found the screenshots I'd organized. "Here, you can see for yourself." She took the phone from me and began to scroll. I watched her face as she read, watched it shift from neutral to something harder, something that reminded me of the grandmother who had made Kevin pay for that vase, who had always valued truth above comfort. She read for a long time, longer than I expected. The party continued around us, laughter and conversation and the clink of glasses. But we existed in a bubble of silence, grandmother and granddaughter, truth laid bare between us. Finally, she handed the phone back. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. "And you didn't say anything to any of them?" "No." "Why not?" I thought about the question. Because I didn't want them to be able to dismiss it. I didn't want to cry or yell or give them anything they could use to call me unstable. I stopped trying to find the right words. I wanted someone to know, someone who would understand what it meant. And you chose me. I chose you. Grandma was quiet again. She looked out the window at the darkening street, at the lights of the restaurant across the way, at something I couldn't see. I need to think about this, she said finally. You're asking me to act on information that will change this family. Permanently. I don't take that lightly. I'm not asking you to do anything, I said. I just wanted you to know the truth. What you do with it is your decision. She turned back to me, and for the first time, I saw something like approval in her expression. That's exactly what you should have said. The cake was brought out, we sang happy birthday. Grandma blew out her candles, all 80 of them, electric for fire safety reasons, and everyone clapped and cheered. I stood at the edge of the crowd, watching my family perform their joy. Kevin had his arm around Jennifer. Maya was hoisting one of the twins so she could see better. Mom was wiping tears from her eyes, probably genuine. She did love Grandma, in her way. Did they love me? That was the question I kept coming back to. Was it possible to love someone and mock them in a secret chat for 7 years? Was love compatible with that kind of sustained, systematic cruelty? I didn't know anymore. I wasn't sure I'd ever known what love actually was, at least the family kind. Maybe I'd been operating on a false definition my whole life. Grandma caught my eye across the room. She gave me a small nod. I wasn't sure what it meant, but something in my chest loosened slightly, knowing that one person, at least, knew the truth. The party wound down around 9. People started gathering their things, exchanging hugs, promising to see each other soon. I was helping Maya clear some of the decorations when Grandma approached our table. I'd like to say something, she said, before everyone leaves. Maya blinked. Of course, Grandma. Let me get everyone's attention. Within a few minutes, the family had gathered again. Kevin was checking his phone. Mom was smoothing her dress. Dad was standing with his hands in his pockets, patient as always. Grandma stood at the head of the table, where her birthday cake had been, and looked at each of us in turn. I want to thank you all for coming tonight, she began. 80 years is a long time to be alive. I've buried a husband and too many friends to count. I've watched the world change in ways I never could have imagined. But through all of it, the one constant has been this family. Mom made a soft sound of agreement. Maya was smiling. Or so I thought. The room shifted. I could feel it, that collective intake of breath when people sense something isn't going the way they expected. Tonight, my granddaughter Claire showed me something, Grandma continued. A group chat that's existed for 7 years, a chat that includes every member of this family except her, a chat where she's been called names I won't repeat, where bets were placed on her failures, where her divorce and her struggles and her attempts to stay connected to all of you were mocked and ridiculed. Kevin had gone very pale. I watched it happen, watched the blood drain from his face as understanding dawned. Grandma, Maya started. I'm not finished. Maya closed her mouth. I want to be very clear about something, Grandma said. I am not dying. I am not sick. God willing, I will have many more birthdays, and at every single one of them, I will remember this night. I will remember that my children and grandchildren, the people I raised and loved and sacrificed for, created a secret space dedicated to tearing down one of their own, and I will remember who participated and who didn't, and who knew and said nothing. She paused. The silence was absolute. When I die, which again, I have no plans to do anytime soon, there will be an inheritance. Some of you have been counting on that. I've heard the comments, I know the assumptions, and I want you to know that as of tonight, I will be meeting with my attorney to revise my will. Mom, my mother said, that's Diane. I watched you laugh at your own daughter in writing. Don't mom me. My mother looked like she'd been slapped. I think in all her years, she'd never heard Grandma speak to her that way. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what to do, Grandma said. You're all adults. You've made your choices. But I want you to understand something. She looked at Kevin, at Maya, at my parents, at each of them in turn. Claire did nothing wrong. She loved you. She trusted you. She showed up for you. And you took that love and that trust and you made it into a joke. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. Kevin opened his mouth. Grandma, it was just It wasn't serious, it was just. Don't, Grandma said. Whatever excuse you're about to make, I've already read it in that chat. It's just jokes. She wouldn't understand. It's how we cope with her neediness. I've read all of it, Kevin. Every word. Kevin shut his mouth. Claire, Grandma said, turning to me for the first time. Come here. I walked to her. In front of everyone, she took my hands in hers. Her grip was stronger than I expected, steady and warm. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't know. I'm sorry that the family I built became something capable of hurting you like this. My eyes were burning. I hadn't planned to cry. I'd promised myself I wouldn't give them that. But Grandma's hands were warm and her eyes were kind, and somehow, in that moment, it was okay. I don't know what happens next, she continued. That's for all of you to figure out. But I want you to know that I see you, the real you, and you deserve better than what you got. She squeezed my hands once, then let go, then she picked up her purse, looked around the room at her stunned, silent family and said, Patricia, would you drive me home? I'm tired. In the aftermath, no one spoke. Aunt Patricia gathered her things with shaking hands and led Grandma toward the door. The twins started crying. They could feel the tension even if they didn't understand it. And Maya automatically moved to comfort them, operating on maternal autopilot. Kevin was the first to recover. He turned to me with something that might have been anger or might have been fear, his face still pale. You did this on purpose. I looked at him. My brother, the person who had created the chat, named it with an emoji, spent 7 years cataloging my failures. I showed Grandma the truth, I said. What she did with it was her choice. You knew she would. I knew she deserved to know who her family really was. Kevin's jaw worked. I could see him trying to formulate a response, trying to find the angle, the argument, the manipulation that would make this my fault instead of his. That was what he did, what he'd always done. Made himself the reasonable one, the victim, the person who was just being realistic about his pathetic sister. This is insane, he finally said. It was a group chat, a private group chat. We were just venting. You were betting on my divorce, I said. You were mocking my job. You called me the charity case for 7 years. That's just, he ran a hand through his hair. You're taking it out of context. What context makes any of that okay? He didn't have an answer. Of course he didn't. There wasn't one. Maya was watching us. The twins had calmed down, and she was holding one on each hip, her face a complicated mixture of guilt and defensiveness. Claire, she said, I'm so sorry. I never meant. When I added you to the chat, it was an accident. I was trying to add someone else, and I know it was an accident, I said. That's what makes it almost funny. 7 years of secrets, and it all came undone because you were careless. I'm not the only one who said things. She glanced at Kevin. It wasn't just me. I know. I looked at her, at my sister, at the person I'd moved back to the city to be closer to. I read everything, Maya. I know exactly who said what. Mom stepped forward. She looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, diminished somehow. Claire, honey, don't. I just want to explain. There's nothing to explain. My voice was calm. I'd practiced this too, this moment when they would try to justify, to apologize, to make this something I should forgive. I read the chat, all of it. I know what you said. I know what you thought. I know what you really think of me. That's not what we really think. Mom. I looked at her, at the woman who had raised me, who had held my hand at my wedding and my divorce, who had typed laughing emojis at jokes about my failures. Please don't insult me by lying now. She didn't have anything to say to that. Dad hadn't spoken. He was standing near the back of the restaurant, watching everything with that patient, detached expression I knew so well. The father who stayed out of conflict, who let things happen around him, who bet against his own daughter and lost $200. Dad, I said. He met my eyes. For a moment I saw something there. Regret, maybe, or shame. But then it was gone, replaced by that careful neutrality. I don't know what you want me to say, Claire. I want you to say something honest. He was quiet for a long moment, then, we should have been kinder. I knew that at the time. I should have said something. It wasn't an apology, it wasn't even close to enough. But it was the most honest thing anyone had said to me all night. and somehow that made it worse. I'm going to go now, I said. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if we're ever going to be a family again, but I know I'm not going to pretend anymore. And I hope, my voice caught just slightly, I hope you'll think about why I had to find out like this. Why none of you ever just talked to me. No one tried to stop me as I gathered my things. No one followed me to the door. I walked out into the cool night air, the sounds of the restaurant fading behind me, and for the first time in 3 weeks, for the first time in maybe 7 years, I felt like I could breathe. The drive home was quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't cry. I just drove through the dark streets of my hometown, past the houses I'd known my whole life, past the parks where I'd played as a child, past all the landmarks of a history I wasn't sure I could trust anymore. When I got home, I sat in my car for a long time. The engine was off. The night was silent except for distant traffic and the occasional bark of a neighbor's dog. I thought about what came next. There would be fallout, I knew that. Kevin would be furious. Maya would try to make peace. Mom would cry and call me ungrateful. Dad would stay silent, as always. The family chat, the real one, the one I wasn't supposed to see, would probably explode with messages about what I'd done, how I'd manipulated Grandma, how I'd always been dramatic and this proved it. But they'd have to do it knowing that I could see, that I was watching, that every word they typed might end up in front of someone they wanted to impress. That was something, I thought. Not justice, exactly, not revenge, just the loss of their safe space to be cruel, just the knowledge that someone was paying attention. Was it enough? I didn't know. I wasn't sure enough was a concept that applied here. Nothing could give me back the 7 years of believing I was loved. Nothing could erase the memory of reading those messages, of feeling my entire understanding of my family crumble into dust. But Grandma knew. Grandma believed me. Grandma had stood up in front of everyone and said I deserved better. For now, that was what I had. The next morning, my phone started ringing early. Kevin, I didn't answer. Maya, I didn't answer. Mom, I didn't answer. Dad didn't call. That somehow felt right. Instead of engaging with any of them, I got dressed and drove to Grandma's house. She lived in the same modest ranch-style home she'd occupied since Grandpa died, the one with the garden out front and the porch swing she never sat on. She answered the door, still in her robe, looking tired but unsurprised. I thought you might come by, she said. Come in, I'll make tea. Her kitchen was warm and smelled like something baking, banana bread maybe, her standard comfort food. I sat at the worn wooden table where I'd eaten countless meals growing up, where I'd done homework while she graded papers, where I'd cried about teenage heartbreaks that now seemed impossibly small. She set a cup of tea in front of me and sat down across the table. How are you feeling? I don't know, I said honestly. Relieved, sad, empty. That sounds about right. I didn't plan for it to go like that, I said. I was just going to tell you. I wasn't expecting you to make a scene. She almost smiled. Claire, I'm 80 years old. I've earned the right to make whatever scenes I want. But the inheritance, the will, I meant every word. Her voice was firm. I've been thinking about it all night, about what kind of family I raised, about what I missed, what I didn't see. She paused. I don't blame myself for what they did. They're adults. They made their choices. But I keep wondering if there's something I could have done differently. Some way I could have taught them better. It's not your fault. No, she agreed. But it happened in my family. That means something. We sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, watching the morning light move across her kitchen floor. It felt peaceful in a way nothing had felt for weeks, like the worst had already happened, and now there was just the quiet work of figuring out what came next. Grandma, I said finally, what do I do now? She considered the question. What do you want to do? I want them to understand, I said. I want them to really understand what they did. Not just apologize because they got caught, but actually get it. That might not happen. I know. Some people aren't capable of that kind of self-reflection. They'll find ways to make this your fault, to convince themselves they were the victims. Kevin especially. She shook her head. That boy has always had a talent for justification. So what do I do? You live your life. She reached across the table and took my hand, the same way she'd done last night. You decide what relationships you want to have and what boundaries you need. You stop performing for people who don't deserve your performance. What if I don't have any family left after that? Then you'll have me, she squeezed my hand. And you'll have yourself, which is more than some people manage. It wasn't the answer I wanted. I wanted her to tell me that everything would work out, that my family would apologize and change and we'd all be closer than ever. I wanted the fairy tale ending where trauma brings people together instead of tearing them apart. But Grandma had never lied to me, and she wasn't about to start now. In the weeks that followed, things happened the way I expected, and also the way I didn't. Kevin stopped speaking to me entirely. He blocked my number, removed me from the family chat, the original one, the one I was supposed to be in, and sent a mass text to everyone explaining that I had betrayed the family and he wouldn't participate in any events I attended. His version of events, as relayed by Maya, was that I had manipulated Grandma and destroyed the family for attention. Maya tried to play peacemaker. She called me crying, apologizing profusely, explaining that she'd never meant any of it, that Kevin was the ringleader and she'd just gone along with it because that's what everyone was doing. She wanted to meet for coffee. She wanted to talk it out. She wanted us to be sisters again. I said I'd think about it. I wasn't ready to forgive her, but I also wasn't ready to close that door forever. Maybe someday we'd find our way back to each other, maybe not. The uncertainty felt like something I could live with. Mom oscillated between guilt and defensiveness. Some days she'd send long texts about how sorry she was, how she'd never meant to hurt me, how the chat was just a place to vent frustrations, and it had gotten out of hand. Other days she'd send messages suggesting I'd overreacted, that family conflicts should stay in the family, that involving Grandma was cruel and manipulative. I stopped responding to the texts, either kind. There was nothing I could say that would change anything, and I was tired of trying. Dad sent one message, a week after the party. I should have stood up for you. I'm sorry I didn't. It was the closest thing to accountability I got from any of them, and it still wasn't enough. Grandma's birthday became a dividing line, before and after. There was my family as I'd understood it, and then there was my family as it actually was, and the two versions had nothing to do with each other. I thought a lot about those 7 years, about all the dinners and holidays and casual conversations where I believed I was part of something real, about the energy I'd spent trying to be close to people who were laughing at me the whole time. All that time, I'd blame myself for feeling like an outsider. I thought there was something wrong with me, something that made me harder to love, harder to include. I'd worked so hard to be easier, to be more pleasant, to take up less space. And the whole time, the problem wasn't me. The problem was them. The problem was a family that had designated a scapegoat and committed to the lie so thoroughly that even the scapegoat believed it. There's a particular kind of grief that comes with realizing you've been performing for an audience that was never really there, that the love you thought you felt flowing in both directions was actually just you, pouring yourself into people who saw you as a joke. I felt that grief for weeks after the party, felt it sitting at my kitchen table, felt it walking through the grocery store, felt it lying awake at night in my too quiet apartment. But underneath the grief, something else was growing, something that felt like relief. I didn't have to perform anymore. I didn't have to show up to family dinners and make small talk with people who mocked me behind my back. I didn't have to pretend Kevin's jokes were funny or Maya's passive aggression was sisterly concern. I didn't have to wonder why I always felt slightly off, slightly wrong, slightly not enough. I had an answer now. The answer was that they had made me feel that way on purpose. And now that I knew, I could stop wondering what was wrong with me and start building something different. 6 months later, I got a new job. Not a huge leap, not some dramatic career transformation, but a position at a company I actually believed in, doing work that I actually enjoyed, with a team that treated me like a colleague instead of a project. The salary was better, the commute was shorter, the people were kinder. I didn't tell my family. The old family chat had dissolved after the party, and I hadn't been added to whatever new configuration they'd created. I got updates sometimes from Grandma, who had stayed true to her word about the will and who invited me to monthly dinners at her house, just the two of us. She told me about Kevin's anger, Maya's attempts to pretend everything was normal, my parents' uncomfortable silence when her name came up. They keep waiting for you to apologize, she told me once, over pot roast. For what? For telling the truth, I suppose. For making them face what they did. That's not going to happen. I know, she smiled slightly. That's why I keep inviting you to dinner. A year after the party, I ran into Kevin at the grocery store. He was in the cereal aisle, holding a box of the same brand we'd eaten as kids, and for a moment neither of us spoke. I could see him calculating whether to ignore me, whether to confront me, whether to pretend nothing had happened. "Claire," he said finally, just my name, no inflection. "Kevin." We stood there, two adults who had once been children together, who had played in the same backyard and fought over the same toys and grown into people who couldn't look at each other without remembering everything. "Mom's having a hard time," he said. "She misses you. She knows where to find me. You could make the first move, be the bigger person." I almost laughed. "Kevin, I spent 40 years being the bigger person, being the one who reached out, who forgave, who tried to keep the peace. And the whole time, you were all laughing at me in a group chat." "That's not—" He stopped, sighed. "It wasn't like that. I read every message. I know exactly what it was like." He didn't have a response. Of course he didn't. There was no response that could make 7 years of cruelty disappear. No magic words that could restore what they'd broken. "I hope you're happy," he said finally. "With whatever this is, this crusade you're on to punish everyone." "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just not pretending anymore." He shook his head like I'd said something pitiable and walked away. I finished my shopping. I went home. I made dinner and watched a movie and went to bed. And somewhere in there I realized that I felt okay. Not great, not healed, not transformed, but okay. The encounter that would have destroyed me a year ago had barely registered. That was progress, I thought. That was something. Grandma died 2 years after her 80th birthday. Not suddenly, she'd been sick for months, though she'd kept it from most of us, not wanting fuss. I found out 3 weeks before the end, when she invited me to dinner and told me matter-of-factly that she didn't have much time left. "I want you to know something," she said. "I changed the will like I said I would. Kevin and your parents are going to be surprised, maybe angry. I wanted you to be prepared." "Grandma, I never wanted—" "I know you didn't. That's part of why I'm doing it." She reached across the table. "You were the only one who told me the truth, even when it was hard, even when you could have kept your mouth shut and kept the peace. That matters to me." "It matters to me too," she smiled. "I know, that's why we get along." She died on a Tuesday peacefully, in her own bed with a hospice nurse nearby. I was there. I'd been visiting every day, and I held her hand as she went. She didn't say any last words or impart any final wisdom. She just breathed, and then she didn't, and then she was gone. The funeral was complicated. Kevin showed up with Jennifer and looked at me like I was a stranger. Maya tried to hug me, and I let her, briefly, but we didn't speak beyond that. Mom cried, and Dad stood beside her with his hand on her back, and none of them looked at me directly. The reading of the will was worse. Grandma had left the bulk of her estate to me, not because I needed it, though I did, a little, the way most middle-class people could use more money, but because she wanted to make a statement. There was a letter attached, addressed to the family, explaining her decision. "I have watched this family for decades," she wrote. "I have seen how you treat each other when you think no one is looking. I have seen kindness and cruelty, honesty and deception, love and its absence. Claire showed me the truth about who you are, not because she wanted money or revenge, but because she believed I deserved to know. That takes courage. That takes integrity. Those are the values I tried to teach all of you. I am leaving my estate to the person who demonstrated those values most clearly. If you disagree with my decision, I invite you to consider why I made it." Kevin contested the will. The lawsuit dragged on for months, full of accusations about manipulation and undue influence. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. Grandma had been of sound mind, had made her wishes clear, had every right to dispose of her assets as she saw fit. Kevin stopped speaking to me after that. So did my parents. So did Maya, eventually. After a few failed attempts at reconciliation that collapsed under the weight of everything unsaid, I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did. Some part of me still wanted the family I'd thought I had, the fantasy of people who loved me unconditionally. That part never quite went away, even as I built something new. But I had Grandma's letter. I had her faith in me, her recognition of who I really was, and I had the knowledge that I'd told the truth, even when it cost me everything, because that was the kind of person I wanted to be. Here is the thing about betrayal. It doesn't end when you discover it. It echoes. It reverberates through years of memories, recasting everything in a new and harsher light. Every moment you thought was real becomes suspect. Every piece of love you believed you received becomes something else: performance, obligation, lie. I spent a long time living in those echoes, replaying conversations, re-examining interactions, trying to figure out what was genuine and what wasn't. It was exhausting work, and ultimately fruitless. I would never know for sure. Some moments might have been real, even if the overall pattern was cruel. Some of their love might have been genuine, even if it was entangled with contempt. Eventually, I stopped trying to figure it out. What mattered wasn't whether they had ever really loved me. What mattered was whether I could love myself enough to stop needing their answer. I moved eventually, not far, just to a different neighborhood, a fresh start that wasn't running away. I made new friends slowly, the way adults do when they're no longer protected by the built-in social structures of school or work. I went to therapy, which helped, and took up gardening, which helped more. I learned to exist in my own life without constantly measuring myself against the family I'd lost. Some days I think about them, what they're doing, whether they're happy, whether they ever think about me with anything other than resentment. I imagine Kevin telling his kids the story of their crazy aunt who destroyed the family over a group chat. I imagine Maya explaining to her twins that Auntie Claire isn't coming to Christmas because of a misunderstanding that happened before they were born. I wonder if they ever tell the truth. Probably not. The truth is uncomfortable, and my family was never good with discomfort. Last month I got a message. It was from Maya, the first contact I'd had from any of them in years. Just a few lines, carefully worded. Claire, I know it's been a long time. I don't know if you want to hear from me, and I understand if you don't respond. But I've been thinking about you, about what happened, about the things I said and didn't say. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I think about it, that I'm sorry, that I hope you're okay. I read the message several times, looked for the angle, the manipulation, the hidden agenda, old habits, but there didn't seem to be one. Just my sister, reaching out across years of silence, saying something that sounded almost like accountability. I haven't responded yet. I don't know if I will. What I do know is this: I am okay, not perfect, not healed, not the person I would have been if none of this had happened. But okay in the way that matters, at peace with my choices, at home in my own life, no longer waiting for people who hurt me to finally see me clearly. Grandma used to say that truth always matters, that you tell it and let other people decide what to do with it. I told my truth. My family decided what to do with it, and their decision was to cut me loose. But here's the part they didn't count on. I'm still here, still standing, still breathing, still living a life that doesn't require their validation or their approval or their secret group chat where they decide how well I'm doing. I got added to that chat by accident. An errant tap, a moment of carelessness, 923 messages that were never meant for me. Thank you for the evidence, I'd written. And then I'd waited. And now I'm done waiting. The story of my family doesn't end with a neat resolution. Nobody apologized in a way that mattered. Nobody changed in a fundamental way. The relationships I lost aren't coming back, and the relationships I'm building are cautious, boundaried, slow. But here's what I've learned. Sometimes the ending isn't a victory. Sometimes it's just an ending. A place where the story stops not because everything is resolved, but because you've decided to stop letting other people write it for you. I'm writing my own story now. It's quieter than the one my family was writing about me, less dramatic. No charity case, no secret bets, no laughing emojis. Just a woman in her 40s, living alone, getting up each morning and choosing to be okay. It's not the life I imagined, but it's mine.